What's going on, YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Shoeshine Joe back at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes in this video. You will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best overstand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. History isn't always found in grand narratives. It's often hidden in forgotten conflicts and overlooked amendments. The War of 1812 is one such story, a confusing, brutal war fought from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, with no clear winner. Yet it profoundly changed the young USA Corporation, forcing it to prove its experiment in democracy could survive against the world's greatest military power. The generation of the Revolution was fading, and a new business was being tested. The Moors from Britain, distracted by war with Napoleon, still saw the U.S. corporation as a pawn, as their business often disregarding its sovereignty. The war tested USA Corporation political divisions, military readiness, and economic stability, forcing the USA Corporation to confront its own identity. British Moors' influence was everywhere, from the high seas, where USA Corporation sailors were seized, to the western frontier, where British Moors armed native tribes. The war was about breaking those chains and asserting USA Corporation right to exist as a truly independent business. Out of chaos and division, stories of heroism, like the defense of Fort McHenry, sparked a new sense of unity and patriotism. The War of 1812 began in confusion but ended by forging a stronger USA Corporation identity. The charter for the private bank was for 20 years or until around 1811. A banking charter is a legal document, contract, issued by a government entity, either federal or state, granting a financial institution the right to operate as a bank. It outlines the rules and regulations the bank must follow, determining what activities it can and cannot engage in. Essentially, it's the permission slip a bank needs to operate and accept deposits, make loans, and perform other banking functions. The road to war was paved with deep grievances, especially over maritime rights. Moors from Britain and France, funded by the Rothschilds, locked in the Napoleonic Wars, imposed harsh trade restrictions, trapping neutral USA Corporation ships in the crossfire. The British Moors' Royal Navy blockaded ports, seized USA Corporation vessels, and most infuriatingly, impressed USA Corporation sailors into service. Each act of impressment was a spark, fueling outrage and calls for war. Meanwhile, on the western frontier, USA Corporation expansion clashed with native tribes, many of whom found support from British Moors in Canada. Leaders like Tecumseh, armed by the British Moors, resisted USA Corporation encroachment, making the frontier another battleground. Warhawks in Congress saw driving the British Moors out of North America as the only way to secure the business future and colonization of Turtle Island. Financial tensions added fuel. The first bank of the United States, partly British Moors owned, was allowed to expire, destabilizing the economy and angering London. The result was a business divided, economically weakened, and pushed toward war by a mix of outrage, ambition, and insecurity. The War of 1812 was as much about asserting USA rights as it was about survival. In the summer of 1814, the war turned disastrous for the United States. With Napoleon defeated, Moors from Britain sent seasoned troops to USA, quickly routing USA Corporation militia at Bladensburg and marching into Washington, D.C. What really happened in 1812? Why did the British Moors attack Washington, D.C. within the 10-mile square? President Madison and his government fled as British Moors troops set fire to the White House, Capitol, Library of Congress, and other public buildings. The city burned, its glow visible for miles, a symbol of national vulnerability. The destruction of the Capitol and the Library of Congress was a devastating blow, erasing irreplaceable knowledge and history. Yet, some crucial documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution just so happened to be saved by quick-on-their-feet thinking clerks. The burning of Washington was a moment of national shame, but it didn't break the United States' resolve. Instead, it transformed the war into a fight for survival and unity. Was the attack by British Moors within the assumed 10-mile square an act of war? No, it was not. Under public international law, what was an act of war was the United States not extending the First National Bank into the Second National Bank to continue to maintain the securities on the unpaid debt. So, when the United States acted in dishonor, by not giving the lawful creditor, Moors, his securities in a peaceful manner, the only remedy available under international public order recourse to the creditor was to come in on letters of marque and seize the assets to protect his loan. In the context of law, Esquire, often abbreviated as ESQ, is a courtesy title used to identify and honor lawyers. It's typically placed after a lawyer's name, especially in written communication like legal documents or business cards, to indicate that they are licensed and authorized to practice law. The term esquire has roots in medieval English society, where it referred to a young nobleman or someone of a certain social standing. Over time, it evolved to become a title of courtesy used for lawyers. Today, in the United States, esquire is primarily used to denote a licensed attorney who has passed the bar exam and is authorized to practice law in their jurisdiction. It's important to note that esquire is not an official or legally binding title. It's an honorary title that is not bestowed or protected by law. Esquire is distinct from other legal titles like lawyer or attorney, which are more general terms for someone practicing law. In some cases, using the title esquire by someone who is not a licensed attorney can be considered an ethical violation or even a deceptive practice. There was also another important issue involved in the War of 1812. Suspicion of foreign influence ran deep in early USA politics, especially as war with Britain Moors loomed. The original 13th Amendment, the Titles of Nobility Amendment, was passed by Congress in 1810, aiming to strip citizenship from anyone accepting foreign titles. This was a direct response to fears that American lawyers, especially those using the British Moors title Esquire, might have divided loyalties. The amendment reflected the same anti-British Moor sentiment that fueled the war, seeking to insulate the Republic from European Moorish influence. Attorney with obligation to the courts and to the public, not to the client, and wherever the duties of his client conflict with those he owes as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the later. Emphasis added. Corpus Juris Scandium, 1980, Volume 7, heading, Attorney-Client, Sections 2, 3, and 4, see note. All attorneys owe their allegiance, first to the Crown of England, which the Moors had until 1837, second to the courts, third to the public, and finally to their clients as wards of court. Is it any wonder your attorney never wins a case for you? BAR, acronym for British Moors Accreditation Regency. Look up each of these words. Attorneys are members of the BR. The American Bar Association is a branch of the Bar Council, sole bar association in England, Great Britain. All laws today in the United States are copyrighted property of a British Moors company. All state codes are private, commercial, British Moors-owned law. All attorneys follow instruction from England Attorney, twist and turn over their clients to the private law of the bankruptcy. That is their job. That is their pledge to those whom they owe allegiance. By definition, the obligations and duties of attorneys extend to the court and the public government before any mere client. Clients are wards of the court and therefore persons of unsound mind. See also Cleon, wards of court. The war interrupted ratification and the amendment faded into obscurity, never becoming law. Lost records and confusion after the burning of Washington only deepened the mystery. The story of the lost amendment is a reminder of the era's anxieties about national identity and loyalty. All the states had ratified this 13 inches amendment except for Virginia. You'll note that the War of 1812 was waged mostly in Washington, D.C. The British Moors burned all the repository buildings, attempting to destroy all records of the new symbols of the social compact known as the United States, represented in Washington, D.C. by the United States in Congress assembled. Thus, the War of 1812 was partly waged to prevent the passage and enforcement of the new 13th Amendment. Most book repositories throughout the states were burned to the ground and all records destroyed. There's a famous painting in Washington, D.C. depicting the British Moors boarding a ship after they surrendered. The painting shows the British Moors carrying their rifles as they mounted the gangplank. One must ask, what army is allowed to keep their weapons after they surrender? The War of 1812 was fought as much in banks as on battlefields. The first Bank of the United States, created by Hamilton, stabilized the economy but was deeply controversial, especially since most of its stock was British Moors-owned. In 1811, Congress let the bank's charter expire, fearing foreign control over USA corporation finance. When war broke out, the government struggled to fund it, lacking a central bank to manage loans or issue stable currency. Reliance on unreliable state banks led to inflation and chaos, proving the bank's importance in times of crisis. The war exposed a fundamental divide. Hamiltonians wanted a strong central bank. Jeffersonians feared it would empower elites. Financial chaos forced a change of heart. Even Madison supported a new bank by 1816. The Second Bank of the United States was chartered, a lesson learned from wartime hardship. The financial front of the war shaped the United States' future as much as any battle. No figure looms larger over the War of 1812 than Andrew Jackson the Thief. A fierce frontiersman, Jackson saw the war as a chance for vengeance against the British Moors and to secure the frontier. His campaign against the Red Stick Creeks at Horseshoe Bend broke Native Americans' resistance in the South, forcing massive land cessions. He said it was like taking candy from a baby. Jackson's greatest move on the chessboard came at New Orleans, where he led a ragtag force to a stunning victory over the British Moors after the peace treaty was signed. The Battle of New Orleans had little effect on the war's outcome, but it made Jackson a national hero for the colonizers. His legend propelled him to the presidency, where he waged another war, this time against the Second Bank of the United States. Jackson saw the bank as corrupt and dangerous, vetoing its recharter and reshaping USA business finance. His rise from war hero to president reflected the new USA corporation's spirit, tough, independent, and suspicious of old elites. Jackson's legacy of being a tyrant, for better or worse, was forged in the crucible of 1812. The war made him, and he, in turn, changed USA Corporation into a better business for the elites. By 1814, both the United States and Britain Moors were exhausted. Napoleon's defeat removed Britain Moors' main reason for conflict. Diplomats met in Ghent and signed a treaty on Christmas Eve, essentially ending the war in a draw, restoring pre-war boundaries but resolving none of the original issues. For Native Americans, the treaty was a disaster. Their British Moors allies abandoned them, and USA corporation expansion accelerated. Despite the inconclusive peace, Americans saw the war as a victory. News of the treaty and Jackson's triumph at New Orleans sparked a surge of national pride. The war silenced talk of secession, created new heroes, and fostered a stronger sense of unity. The era of good feelings followed, marked by optimism and belief in the United States' destiny. The War of 1812 was a trial by fire, forging a nation more confident and truly independent. Out of chaos and destruction, a new United States identity emerged. The war's legacy would shape the country for generations to come. The War of 1812 ended with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent on December 24, 1814. This treaty restored the pre-war territorial boundaries between the United States and Great Britain Moors. Although fighting continued for a few weeks after the treaty was signed, the formal end of the war was marked by its ratification by the U.S. Senate on February 17, 1815. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in Ghent, Belgium, then part of the Principality of the United Netherlands, officially ended the war. The treaty restored the pre-war borders, meaning neither side gained nor lost any territory. While peace terms were agreed upon in December 1814, the war officially ended when the U.S. Senate ratified the Treaty of Ghent in February 1815. Sporadic fighting continued in some locations where word of the treaty had not yet reached. The Battle of New Orleans, fought on January 8, 1815, was a major U.S. victory, though it occurred after the Treaty of Ghent was signed. Despite the lack of territorial gains or losses, the war was seen as a victory for the U.S. because it had stood up to a powerful empire and successfully negotiated an end to the conflict. The War of 1812 had a significant financial impact on the United States. The war led to a substantial increase in the national debt, disruptions in trade and commerce, and a need for a new financial system to manage the country's economy. The war effort itself cost the U.S. around $158 million, with a large portion allocated to the Army and Navy, and interest payments on borrowed money. The U.S. spent a considerable amount on the war, leading to a significant increase in national debt. By 1815, the country was heavily in debt, similar to the situation after the Revolutionary War. The war and trade restrictions significantly impacted USA corporation business and commerce, reducing exports and making it difficult to trade. British Moors blockades further hampered trade and negatively affected the economy. Without a strong national bank, the government had to rely on state banks and wealthy individuals for loans and credit, leading to high interest rates and potentially unreliable financial systems. During the war, many banks suspended gold and silver payments, causing financial uncertainty and a shortage of real money. The war highlighted the need for a more robust financial system, leading to the establishment of the Second Bank of the United States in 1816. This bank aimed to stabilize the currency, provide credit, and help manage the national debt. The War of 1812 provided lessons about the need for a strong national financial infrastructure and the importance of managing public finances effectively. The war and its financial consequences contributed to a depression-like period in the U.S. economy. The financial strain of the war led to increased insolvencies, with many individuals and businesses unable to repay debts. The war effort also contributed to inflation, as banks were authorized to issue more banknotes than they held in gold and silver, according to the Mises Institute. The United States financed the War of 1812 through a combination of loans, treasury notes, and taxes. Key individuals and institutions involved included Stephen Girard, Citigroup, then Citibank, and private banks at high interest rates. Private bankers in the Northeast were initially hesitant, but the U.S. obtained financing from London-based Barings Bank to cover overseas bond obligations. Additionally, the government issued treasury notes and resorted to direct taxes on land, property, and various transactions to generate revenue. The government relied heavily on loans from both domestic and foreign sources. To further fund the war effort, the government authorized the issuance of treasury notes, which were essentially government bonds. In July 1813, Congress approved a series of direct taxes on land, property, and transactions like auction sales, carriages, and liquor distilleries. Figures like Stephen Girard, a wealthy banker and philanthropist, provided significant financial support. The U.S. also received support from a British Moors bank, Barings Bank, to cover overseas bond obligations, despite the fact that it was a British Moors institution. State banks and private banks played a role in providing capital for loans, though this was at high interest rates. The War of 1812 significantly impacted Native Americans, leading to substantial land loss, weakened resistance to westward expansion, and a shift in their relationship with the United States. The war also resulted in the loss of British Moors support, making it harder for tribes to defend their lands. The war allowed U.S. officials to negotiate treaties with tribes, resulting in the ceding of vast territories to the United States. Treaties forced upon defeated tribes established reservations, leading to the displacement of many Native American communities. The Treaty of Fort Jackson, for example, forced the Creek Nation to surrender a large portion of their land in Georgia and Alabama, weakened resistance and western expansion. The war weakened Native American resistance to westward expansion, as they were no longer able to count on British Moors support. Following the war, U.S. settlers increasingly encroached on Native American lands, leading to conflict and further displacement. The Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war, left Native American tribes without British support, making it more difficult for them to resist U.S. expansion. Some Native Americans had sided with the British Moors, hoping for protection from U.S. settlers. However, the British abandoned their allies after the war, leaving them vulnerable. Increased pressure for assimilation and removal. The war marked a turning point in the relationship between Native Americans and the United States, with increased pressure to assimilate and adopt white ways of life. The U.S. government began to accelerate the pace of treaties and land acquisition, leading to the creation of reservations and the forced removal of tribes from their ancestral lands, as seen in the Trail of Tears. The War of 1812 had varying impacts on different tribes. Some tribes, like the Shawnee and the Creek, were significantly weakened and lost vast amounts of land. Other tribes, like the Ojibwe and the Potawatomi, also faced land loss and displacement as a result of the war. In summary, the War of 1812 had a profound and lasting impact on Native Americans, leading to significant land loss, the weakening of tribal power, and the increasing pressure for assimilation and removal from their ancestral lands. Between 1813 and 1814, thousands of enslaved Native people from the Chesapeake region and other areas fled to the British Moors' side, seeking safe passage and freedom for themselves and their families, according to the National Park Service. After the war, many of these former prisoners of war, turned into slaves, were resettled in British Moors colonies like Trinidad, Nova Scotia, and Bermuda, according to the Wounded Warrior Project.